Hey, I'm Dave. Welcome to my shop. Today in Dave's garage, a computer guy with lots of cars and tools is going to talk about issues related to autism. None of what you will hear here today is medical advice. And that leads me to a point that I almost want to make every time I speak about the issue. An autism diagnosis is a complex piece of medical diagnostics, best left to developmental pediatricians, neurologists, and similar specialists. It's not something you self-diagnose using a web questionnaire. People don't go around saying they have a little bit of a tumor because they filled out a web form and it said probably. With that out of the way, we can turn to my topic of the day, which is resistance to change amongst those with autism. In particular, how that manifests itself in the face of the Covid-19 global pandemic. Many people with autism are uncomfortable with changes in their environment and their circumstance, and are often willing to go to great lengths to avoid it whenever possible. There is often an insistence upon sameness and a strict adherence to routines. Unlike the stereotypical stick in the mud who simply cannot be bothered to keep up with trends and fashions, however, a person on the autism spectrum may find such change appealing on its merits, while still experiencing anxiety at the prospect of that change. So why do those with autism resist change? People on the spectrum can put a great deal of energy into avoiding change, in part because change can be overstimulating and anxiety-inducing. Changes also reduce the autistic individual's resilience, and too much change can even lead to a meltdown if not well managed. But why? Fundamentally, what causes this resistance to change? First, we should note that change comes in at least three forms: change in oneself, change in one's environment, and changes in one's circumstances. Each can cause significant stress to the autistic individual. The coronavirus represents changes in environment, circumstance, and potentially self as well. In that way, it's a perfect storm of sorts because suddenly everything is different. As we've seen, the resistance to even seemingly trivial changes in environment, such as losing a favorite place to sit, is based in part on the amount of intellectual effort invested by the autistic individual, the effort spent in getting it right in the first place. The sometimes intense resistance to changes in one's circumstance can be hard for the neurotypical to understand. The most classic case might be the need to avoid separation from a loved one. Perhaps it's as simple as the fact that emotional connections are very hard for autistic individuals to build in the first place. So again, anything that jeopardizes them places a huge amount of invested effort in jeopardy. If emotional connections are very hard for them to establish, it makes sense that they will be all the more precious. Change also involves risk. And in my experience, while those with autism are not necessarily risk-averse per se, they often need to intellectually understand and internally accept and agree to the trade-offs involved. It can be maddening to be asked to accept an increase in risk with no attendant benefit. After all, why would you willingly do such a thing? Consider the simple case of introducing an exotic new food to your diet. If the thought of consuming a snail causes you anxiety, you have to weigh that against the potential benefit of how great it might taste. And between you and me, I highly doubt that escargot is so delicious that the risk of eating snails is worth it. And so I'd prefer raspberry yogurt or Sour Patch Kids, but I'm funny that way. Perhaps one of the most basic reasons that people with autism fear change is that they may operate in a rule-based manner in certain areas of their lives. Because so much of human interaction fails to come naturally for them, they must instead build up a practiced repertoire of responses to various situations. Building this repertoire can take a lifetime, and change means that some percentage of what you know, your rule system, is now invalid. But which parts, and how do they get fixed? And finally, change can also simply mean annoyance and irritation. In all of these cases, the common denominator is anxiety. Anxiety over losing invested effort to a capricious external change, anxiety over the unknown of personal change and growth, anxiety over lost emotional connections, and anxiety over risk without reward. There is much about modern social life that can require effort from people with autism. Many aspects of it, such as the interplay of who looks where during conversation, or who speaks next and at what point, are learned one at a time. They become rules or guidelines that the autistic individual follows prescriptively to fit in and behave like everyone else. To deviate from them can cause anxiety because it means the person is now operating outside norms and has to improvise, which they know from experience they're not traditionally good at. Hence, the autistic individual becomes very adept at, and even dependent upon, following a set of prescriptive rules and quickly spotting any exception that lay outside them, whether committed by themselves or others. Plainly stated then, many autistic people rigidly adhere to rituals, behaviors, and circumstances because the alternative, accepting change, causes them intense anxiety. In order to move forward, the person with autism may need to learn to accept the annoyance and irritation associated with any important or unavoidable change. Hand in hand with any neurotypical partners involved, they must then work to face the anxiety and work through it. Change in the coronavirus. The emergence of the Covid-19 pandemic has brought sweeping social and economic changes to the entire world at once. My hometown is located in King County, Washington, what was originally the U.S. epicenter of the pandemic, and we have over 100 dead in my county alone. For me and my family, this is very real and very personal. And yet, it isn't personal. And that's precisely why I believe autistic people may be more resilient to coronavirus stress than they might have expected. One of the worst forms of change for many on the spectrum to tolerate is arbitrary and capricious change caused by human behavior. Conversely, natural disasters may discombobulate them less than many simple personal or emotional matters. I believe that's because a natural disaster has no emotion behind it. There is no will, no intent, no motive. There's no sinister plan to decipher. To put perhaps too fine a point on it, there is no other mind to worry about being blind to. And so portions of the stress that is normally associated with that type of sudden personal change may be absent. I also believe that monotropic thinking and low central coherence allow folks on the spectrum to focus on the details, like the expiration dates on their N95 respirators, and not the big picture, which is kind of terrifying right now. It would be a tough time to be neurotypical and be overloaded with the absolutely surreal feeling that the universe has flown completely out of control and no one can do anything about it. If they are unable to shake that feeling, it can be debilitating to them, leaving them somewhat literally like a deer in headlights. When the big picture gets too scary, an autistic individual may be content to focus in on planning and taking concrete steps to improve their chances. When they're heads down in their full special interest activated place, it's a little easier not to think about the fact that there's literally a killer plague racing around the globe. Accommodations. I believe the first response to any autism symptom that has become pathological is to attempt to accommodate that symptom. That which cannot be practically or reasonably accommodated should be modified, and that which cannot be modified or accommodated forms the surface of your disorder. But the first approach is always simple accommodation. As an example of accommodations that friends might make for an autistic friend, one classic aspect of the character Sheldon on the television show The Big Bang Theory is that he has a particular place that he prefers to sit, and he acts as though it is a significant hardship for him to sit anywhere else. When pressed, he explains carefully the reasons for his selection. In the winter, that seat is close enough to the radiator to remain warm, but not so close as to cause perspiration. In the summer, it is directly in the path of a nice cross breeze because it is ideally located between 3 windows. The angle with which it faces the television is not so direct as to discourage conversation, and yet not so wide as to cause a parallax distortion in the view, and so on. You might think Sheldon likes to sit in the same place all the time merely because people on the spectrum often work so hard to avoid any and all change, but Sheldon's reluctance to move to another spot is not territorial or simply petty based on habit. He has invested a great deal of mental energy into determining the best spot to sit, and he does not want to needlessly lose those benefits without good cause. Unlike a neurotypical person, he would be painfully aware of every moment spent sitting in a less optimal spot. In other words, the moment he is forced to sit elsewhere, all he can think of is the improper temperature, the lack of a breeze, the bad angle to the television, and so on, all of which could have been avoided if only they had listened to simple reason. Even more frustrating would be for Sheldon to lose his spot and to have said spot not put to good use by someone because they failed to appreciate the subtle benefits. If someone could make better use of it, he might actually gladly give it up, but at least mentally, it can be a big deal for such things to go to waste. If the spot is available, and it's very important to him and a trivial matter for others to accommodate that, then why not? In this episode, they effectively push Sheldon as far as they can until he ultimately can bend no further, and he has a television version of a meltdown, strained facial expressions, and an inability to speak, kind of like me. There's not a lot of dignity in that portrayal, perhaps, but it is a comedy and not a documentary. I, too, have a favorite spot to sit on the sofa, and I have many good reasons as to why it's the optimal spot for me. In discussing this topic with my wife, I also learned that our friends and her parents, my in-laws, had accommodated me in similar fashion by letting me have the same spot in their own homes. And here I thought they were just always conveniently free. This is a prime example of an accommodation that people had learned to make for me without knowing why. It's not that I'd ever asked someone to move if they ever took my spot, it's just that they normally do save it for me. I guess they know me, and I hope that doesn't change. Managing coronavirus stress. There are a number of practical things that people on the spectrum can do to reduce and manage the stress of the changes, actual and potential, brought about by the coronavirus. The most important amongst these, I believe, is to maintain structure to your day. You might currently be displaced from work or school, and you might even be effectively locked down in your own home. To the extent you can, you should be going to bed and getting up at the same time every day. Walk the dog, get some exercise, follow a schedule. You may wish to make an exception for weekends, but I encourage you to get up, get dressed, and be ready for your day bright and early, even if you're not quite sure what it is that you'll be doing yet. Going through the motions is psychologically reassuring, because a chaotic schedule would mean you're under some kind of serious external stress. Your body and brain will know it. Keeping things regular and cyclical will help you remain sane and calm. If you are now confined with kids or friends and family that you are not used to being around all day, and if the noise and commotion is a problem, I encourage you to get a good pair of noise-canceling headphones. I recommend the Bose QC35s, and no, this is not sponsored in any way. I just like the headphones, and they seem nearly indestructible. The point is not to eliminate all sound. They don't, as they're not magic. But they lower the overall noise floor significantly. Just don't wear them more than about half the time, or you'll lose the benefits eventually and become dependent on them. If you think it is wise for you to follow the news at all, set aside a time of day, once a day, when you check the news from a reputable, centric source. Then leave it alone. 12 hours won't make a material difference. That includes online and via Facebook and so on. You absolutely, positively do not want to make studying the virus your new special interest. If you've already started, quit it. Go play with trains or computers or miniature figures or whatever you did for fun before the virus, because obsessing over the latest developments will not help you a tiny bit. Resist the temptation to complain and shame and blame. Don't personalize this. Don't obsess about what would be different if who did what at what time for whatever reason. It's counterproductive and accomplishes nothing, and it can serve to load you up with frustration over things not being done the way that you believe they should have been. The last two things might seem cliche, or maybe that's just because they make perfect sense. I'll suggest that you hope for the best and at the same time prepare for the worst, literally. That means focusing on the best likely outcomes, a vaccine one day, new medical treatments, examples of public cooperation, and so on. The range of possible outcomes is wide, and you should keep your mind firmly focused on the best possible ones. Why? In the small amount of auto racing that I've done, you are generally taught to look where you want to go, not where you're afraid of going, because under acute stress, you will naturally steer yourself towards whatever it is you're focused on. It's a natural instinct. That's why Winston Churchill and FDR didn't mope around expecting to lose their war. They continually aimed for total victory, even in the face of incredible odds. But at the same time, they worked feverishly to prepare for every contingency. They prepared for the worst, and you should too. That means remaining focused on positive outcomes while being prepared if things don't go well. Work on your emergency preparedness as a new hobby. Set a specific, reasonable, and achievable target, such as being able to feed and supply yourself and your loved ones for 1 month. Then work on obtaining the spare food and medication and supplies and so on needed to do so, all while fully expecting that you will never need it. If you do these two things well, you can perhaps sleep a little more soundly at night in the belief that things will be okay at some point in the future. And for once, you can tell yourself it's okay to let yourself believe that, because if things don't go exactly according to your optimistic plans, you are secure in the knowledge that you're already as prepared as you possibly can be for most all reasonable contingencies. When you've done all that you can or should do, it helps alleviate a certain amount of stress and a certain type of worry almost entirely. Thanks for joining me today out here in the shop. If you enjoyed this video, or even better, found it a bit useful, I would be honored if you would share it with a YouTube link on your Facebook wall, or tweet out a link, or text it to your friends. This is a tiny, tiny channel that you will never see again unless you subscribe, so be sure to do so if you're interested in seeing any future topics. Until next time in Dave's Garage, stay safe and stay sane out there. Take care. You absolutely strained facial expressions and an inability to speak, kind of like me.